Okay, everybody, I'm going to start by introducing myself, telling you a little bit about the webinar. We'll be just recording this for friends, colleagues, people interested. So my name is Resham Kotecha. I'm the Global Head of Policy at the Open Data Institute. We're a not-for-profit co-founded by Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Sir Nigel Shadbolt. I won't go into detail about what we do because you can read about that on our website. But we are here to discuss party conference season and data policies that came out of that, talk about the implications, to hear your thoughts as well. This is not me talking at you for an hour. There'll be a little bit of me talking and lots of discussion, I hope. But just to share some of the rules, we are recording this webinar. We will share it. If you want to post anything about this, please do tag us. If you'd like to post your name and where you're from in the chat, it's always helpful for us and other attendees to know who else is here. The chat will remain private from our point of view. We won't be sharing it, but if you do share any comments from there, please respect people's privacy and don't quote them without asking for their permission first. But otherwise, we're excited to get started. My colleague Joe is going to be sharing some slides. I will run you through just a little bit about the highlights of party conference season, and then we will get into some discussion about the policies that came out of it and what we think were important and where we think the parties still need to do more work. So, Joe, if you're able to get the slides on the screen for us, that would be great. And then we can get started. Great to see so many people sharing where they're from in the chat. Very much appreciate that. It's good to know we've got such a broad mix of people. So as I said, for anyone who's joined late, my name is Resham Kotecha. I'm Global Head of Policy at the ODI. So we are here to talk about conference season. And I will just start by kicking off that we had a significant party season, very important this year, because I'm sure lots of you have been keeping track of the polls, and you'll know that even though only 15 months ago, the Labour Party won a stonking big majority, the polls are showing that as things stand, we will have a different government at the next election. And of course, 3.5 years is a long time to go, but it does mean that we've got a very important situation here, particularly when it comes to data and AI, shifting policy conversation, and that's why it's really important for us to discuss. So all of the party conferences took place between early September and early October. We kicked off with Reform, and we ended with the Conservatives. And the interesting thing about conference season, of course, for anyone who hasn't been, and I've been lucky enough to be going for 13 years, is you get to hear all about the headline policies, but the fringe events also give us a lot to do in terms of understanding what is happening when it comes to the kind of fringes and what the backbenchers are saying. So I am just going to start by highlighting, and let me just share my screen very quickly. Oh, Joe has now started sharing, so maybe that was just a bit slow to load, but hopefully you can all see the slides now as well. Thank you very much, Joe. So if we just go to the next slide. So as I've mentioned, these are the order of the conferences that we had, starting with Reform. It was the first Reform conference where, they had a broader audience. It was very full capacity. Liberal Democrats, then Labour, the party of government, then the Greens, and then ending with the Conservatives. Next slide. Thanks, Joe. So what happened? And before anyone calls me out on it, I'm going to run through at very high level the policies that came out of each of these. I'm focusing on England, so I'm sorry I don't have England and Nationals. I don't have Welsh or Scottish specific party policies here. But I will give you a very high overview of the 5 parties that I'm referencing, and please, no one get upset at the order in which I'm doing them. I'm just doing them, and I just thought it was fairest to do them in order of number of MPs. So that is the order in which I have done them. So Labour policies related to data and AI. And I will go over these at a high level, but if anyone has thoughts they want to share, think there are policies that touch on data and AI that I've not included, please feel free to pop them into the chat, because I want us to have as broad a conversation as possible. So the Labour Party announced policies related to data and AI. They announced £86 billion of R&D investment across AI, quantum and space. They announced an AI opportunities action plan, AI growth zones, and data centers as critical infrastructure, along with the potential for a digital ID or a BRIC card, as they're calling it. And the implications here, as we see it, is, well, national data infrastructure. We think there's an opportunity to advocate for open standards to be embedded in mission critical data systems and government tech procurement. When it comes to AI assurance and stewardship, there's a chance to shape the evidence base for responsible AI governance and transparent algorithmic assurance frameworks as Labour defines its AI regulation model. When it comes to digital ID, we can push for strong data trust, cooperative models, and public engagement around data use, aligning with work on data stewardship and trust. And when it comes to their announcements on R&D innovation, we can engage with DESA and Treasury to ensure that frameworks inform responsible data access, interoperability, and ethical innovation across that £86 billion R&D portfolio. So that's Labour at a high level. So we could go on to the Conservatives now, please, Jo. So the Conservative Party, they announced facial recognition expansion when it comes to immigration enforcement, and also an energy policy to lower costs for data centers and AI infrastructure. So what are the implications of this? Well, data rights and governance. So we see this as a chance to push for independent analysis on bias, oversight, and proportionality of automated decision-making and surveillance. When it comes to AI assurance infrastructure, we see this as a chance to position civil society research on trust frameworks and assurances infrastructure as essential to balancing national security aims with public trust. We think both are important there. And when it comes to energy and sustainability data, we think this is an opportunity to champion open environmental reporting standards for data center energy and water use, aligning with ambitions on data for climate and infrastructure transparency. So that's at a high level where we see Conservative policies that have come out of conference. Thanks, Jo. When it comes to Lib Dem policies, and please, I know there's lots of us in the group now, please do feel free to keep introducing yourself, and please do feel free to share if you think there's any important inferences to share. And I can see Martin's already saying what he thinks the ODI should do. We would love to hear from you about what you'd like the ODI to be doing. We've obviously got our own ideas. But on Lib Dem policies, their policies kind of reference the doom scrolling cap. They've gone very big on a wider child online safety package, and they've called for stronger online protections and tech trade deals. So what are the implications that we see here? Well, we think platform transparency. We think we can support evidence-based policy by developing open data frameworks for content moderation and algorithmic risk. We think there's a real opportunity here for research access, so to advocate for safe researcher data access models. So think of things like data intermediaries and independent audits that would enable accountability while protecting privacy. And we think this is a great chance to push for digital rights education. So it aligns with civil society's mission to improve digital literacy and trust across civil society and youth groups. Right, on to reform. So at conference specifically, and in kind of the fringe events that related to it, Reform did not really announce any new AI or data announcements, but they did continue their ongoing emphasis on deregulation and energy policy liberalisation. So what do we think the implications are of that? Well, we think there's a risk of the narrative risk there. We may need to reinforce the economic and public value data case for data governance and standards, countering the anti-regulation narratives that we think could risk undermining open data progress. We also think there's an opportunity here for engagement strategy. So monitoring Reform's framing to prepare evidence and communications, demonstrating how open and well-governed data could support growth, efficiency, and sovereignty. So lots of opportunity here to shape Reform's thinking on data and AI, we feel. And then last, but very much not least, the Greens. So the Green Party, when it comes to data and AI, oh gosh, excuse me for accidentally leaving Reform on there, but the Green Party, there were no new major policy announcement on AI, data, or tech at their recent conference. But they do already have existing positions that we know about that really focus on stronger AI regulation, ethical governance, and public accountability. And this is for emerging technologies, along with broader digital rights and environmental data priorities. So what do we think the implications are here? Well, we think it's an opportunity to rely on responsible data use. So the Greens have been emphasizing ethics, transparency, and sustainability. That gives us an opportunity to demonstrate how open data could support environmental, health, and social goals. But there is, of course, a risk of over precaution. So their instinct towards tight regulation on AI could, if taken too far, limit innovation and data sharing. So we would want to balance and emphasize that there needs to be a balance on governance so that we can protect citizens while enabling beneficial uses of data. So that at a high level is the kind of key five parties and their conference seasons. If you could go to the next slide, Joe, please. Thank you. So what I've done now is organize these thematically, and then we'll get on to some more interesting discussion points very short. But when it comes to national data infrastructure and focus on compute and data center prioritization, along with R&D, and we think that creates a window to hardwire open standards for public service data. So for example, the ODI stewards something called OpenActive. Please do look that up. It's a great piece of work that we do with Sport England. That's actually a really valuable and successful example of how open standards can work. It aligns with our recommendation to treat standards as critical public infrastructure. Then we've got health and prevention use cases. So any digital ID or AI-enabled public services we think should integrate assurance, interoperability, and stewardship. So for example, on OpenActive, as I referenced, we see it that health and activity data can and should be able to move safely between a number of bodies in the health space. So please do look that up. It's really fascinating on social prescribing. When it comes to governance, assurance, and rights, we know that the Conservative Party's facial recognition proposals and Labour's digital ID escalates the need for important independent assurance, for impact assessments, for clear redress, and for data minimization. So here we intend to push for assurance as infrastructure and for algorithmic transparency regimes. When it comes to compute and energy policy, we know there's cross-party focus that the Greens especially are really focused on for enabling data center links to directly link to energy siting and grid impacts, but also to be really aware, as the Green Party is pushing for awareness on standards for reporting emissions, water use, and open data on that availability and constraints. And then finally, we think there's a big theming around online harms and youth protection. So Lib Dem social media proposals strengthen the case for interoperable risk and harms data, researcher access, and open auditing data. So these are all areas where we have been and will continue to advocate practical, standardized access frameworks that protect users while enabling scrutiny. So that at a very high level, what we think the kind of thematic areas are from conference season. Joe, if we can move to the next slide, please. So when it comes to post-conference polling signals, the headline takeaways, we think it's always really interesting when we're talking about any policy development to see how the polls have reacted. We should, of course, not be encouraging government or policying by polls, but of course the parties will be thinking about the polls and what they've done. So as lots of you will know, Reform has shown very strong national vote share in multiple polling tracks, both around and after the conference season. So it varies depending on the polling you look at, but the trend is up. And I think every poll has suggested that they will be in government after the next election. Of course, as I said, 3.5 years is a long way to go, but it is very interesting that with such a large Labour majority right now, that is still showing as a massive swing. The Conservative conference, it delivered attention-grabbing pledges, particularly on tax and borders, but public sentiment is still sceptical about readiness for government. The Labour Party experienced a limited immediate conference bounce. So scrutiny on leadership ratings, they obviously weren't helped by rumours of leadership bids by Andy Burnham, some trouble for Angela Rayner, and some member level disquiet, but we think that's likely to be something that reacts more to the budget rather than to conference when it comes to the Labour Party. The Lib Dems showed some steady polling, but not much evidence so far of a Their focus remains on targeted seats and policy definition, but we do have a significant number of local elections next year, and it's likely there'll be a resurgence in the local elections for the Lib Dems, given public feeling about both Labour and Conservatives. And then the Greens have had a steady but modest polling performance following conference, continued gradual growth, showing they are now the favourite party for the under 24s, and for environmentally focused voters, although some limited traction beyond core support. So overall, what do we see? It's a volatile picture. There's some split right dynamics on the Conservative reform side, and that's tending to dominate coverage. And Labour's near-term movement, we think, is likely to hinge on the November budget rather than conference. If anyone feels differently, thinks differently, please feel free to pop in the chat. This is just a summary of the polls and of the policies as we see it. But thank you all so much for joining. And as I said, I really wanted to keep it to give us the chance to focus on kind of group discussion. This shouldn't just be about what I think. So what I'm going to do now is launch a number of polls. These are anonymous, so I will not be able to see how each of you have voted. You will not be able to see, but I would find it really helpful if people would be happy to participate. I've just launched this. I'll share the polls, and I think it's really interesting for us to be able to discuss how people are thinking. So got responses coming in. So the question is, which party do you feel currently has the clearest strategy on data and AI? Which party do you feel most confident in? And, this is not about party allegiance or, no one will know you're choosing a party other than the one you normally vote for or intend to vote for. But it would be good just to know which party you feel has the clearest idea on their strategy when it comes to data and AI. So feel free to take a minute to think about it. Okay, almost everyone has participated now. So I'll just give everyone 30 more seconds. No need to be shy. As I said, no one will know how you voted. I just would like to be able to share as a kind of point of discussion. And what would be great if people are happy to is if you want to pop up your hand, I'd love comments, I'd love thoughts. If you want to add your thoughts in the chat, that's of course totally fine. I'm going to end the poll now. So for the people that haven't written, you've got 10 seconds. Otherwise, I'll end the poll and share the results. But I think it'd be really useful. Sorry, Joe, can you just put us on the next slide? But I'm going to end the poll now and I will share the results. So here for everybody to see. Essentially could have asked what people think if they're choosing a party different to the one they normally vote for. We tend to know the most about the policies of our own party, but knowing everyone's background, I think it's very interesting to see that a quarter of people think none of the parties have a clear strategy on data and AI. But of those that they do feel have an idea, Labour has come out far and ahead of everybody else. 50% of people think Labour have the clearest strategy on data and AI. Does anyone have any thoughts on why that is? I would love to hear in the chat. I'd love people to share why they think that is. Interesting to see we've already had comments on digital ID. Does that mean you feel that's a clear strategy, just you disagree with it? Or is that one that you do not want involved? I'll leave that as a question to percolate on, and I'll ask for some comments once we've done the next few. So I'm going to now share. Sharing. I'm going to do a poll now on recent conference announcements. So I'd love to know which of these recent conference announcements do you think will have the biggest long-term impact on the UK's digital future? Is it Labour's 86 billion R&D and AI growth zones? Is it the Conservatives on AI adoption and data centres? Is it the Lib Dems on online focus and online safety and doom scrolling cap? Is it Labour's proposed digital ID brick card? Or is it the Greens just more general on stronger AI regulation and ethical governance? So I'll give everybody a minute or two to think about that. Really interesting to see. So Tom feels that fixed deployment of live facial recognition is also a form of digital ID, so should be included in that opposition. James, really interesting to hear you think there's a lack of clarity by Labour and most parties on what they mean by AI and how it's intended to drive the outcomes they claim. Any thoughts on which are less credible, James? I'd love to hear that. And Ken, thanks for sharing the perceived Labour focus on AI data policy is in part because this is not a primary area of public policy. So the governing party may always have more investment than opposition parties that necessarily focus on hotter button issues. That's really interesting, Ken. Did you feel that the Conservatives, when they were in government, had more of a focus on AI and data than they do now? I mean, of course, Rishi Sunak, as Prime Minister, held the first ever AI Safety Summit, and it felt like there was a lot that came out on data and AI policy under that government. So do you think it's a running out of steam issue, or do you think that it's, as you say, because they're not in government anymore? So it's really interesting here. I'm going to end the poll now because we've had nearly 2 minutes to answer. But what's really fascinating here, and I'll share these results, is as you can see, almost 40% of people think Labour's investment, that's a significant investment, 86 billion, is going to make the most difference, followed by the Greens' stronger AI regulation. Now, for anyone who picks the Greens, I'd love to know your thoughts on the biggest long-term impact, because of course the Greens, as effective as they have been and can be on policy issues, are a very small party in terms of representation in Parliament right now. So are you picking the Greens, for anyone who voted for them, the 13 people, because you think they're going to change public discourse, or is that based on polling that you think they'll have more parliamentarians next election? Or is that based on just influencing the policy discussion and you think other parties will follow suit sooner? Very interesting to hear if you're able to. If anyone would like to raise a hand and speak, I'd love to call you in. But otherwise, it's really interesting to follow the chat. It is very interesting to think about the comment about parliamentarians knowing what AI is. One of the things the ODI is always talking about is the fact that when we go in to brief parliamentarians of all parties in both houses, often the questions are things like, what is AI? What is compute? What do you mean by bias? And politicians will often talk about the need for data literacy, for AI literacy in schools, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things we're pushing for actually, and the ODI has training programs that take place for the civil service, is actually we need to be educating our policymakers and our business leaders on AI and data and what that is, not just school children. So it's interesting, that focus. And yes, Nick, you're right. It's very easy for opposition parties to advocate headline grabbing proposals and see that. It's really interesting that the point someone's made, I just read it earlier about US tech companies. I don't have a poll question on it, but if anyone wants to comment in the chat, do people think that the Labour government is too close to Trump-aligned tech and AI companies which appear to resist regulation and taxation? And for those of you that think the answer to that is yes, what would you like to see done differently? If the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, called you up and said, what should I do differently? Or the Secretary of State, Sadiq, what would you do? And Tom, that's a very good point on Greens. They now have more paying members than the Conservatives. Their policies align us more closely with the EU, and their policy is least vulnerable to the AI bubble bursting. So you think they can bring public discourse? Very fascinating to hear those discussion points. Thank you. So I'm going to move this on now as a question, although please feel free to keep discussing. And I suspect I know the answer to these questions, but your confidence in UK policymakers. I would love to know how confident you are that UK policymakers understand the real value of data as national infrastructure. Okay, so answers racing in. I'm laughing somewhat because I can see the answers that you cannot. Okay, so I'm going to share the answers because I think this will be very entertaining for people. And I'm delighted to see that there is one person in this group. I'll give you 5 more seconds. I see a few people haven't responded. But I think we've got one very optimistic person in policymakers, which is great. But otherwise, almost 70% of us are sitting and not very confident on this chat. And that together is 85% and not very confident or not at all confident. So I think it would be really great to hear in the chat, useful for us to know from a engagement point of view, but there are, of course, policymakers across the parties. For Lord Clement Jones is one, for example, but there are policymakers who have worked either in data or AI or are really up to speed on those policy matters. So it'd be great to know in the chat, who are the policymakers that you do feel confident in? Who are the policymakers where you think, actually, if we could have 10 of those in Parliament, my answer would be different? And this is something that the ODI pushes a lot, data as national infrastructure. We think that data needs to be invested in. That means the infrastructure, that means the quality, the assurance of it, the interoperability, so being able to use data sets together. And one of the examples that's really brilliant is in the US, an economist, Chetty, has linked household tax income with educational outcomes. So in the UK, we're reliant on questions like, what did your parents do at 14? But we know that an accountant can earn reasonably good money or fantastic money. We know that a plumber can earn minimum wage or significantly, multiples of that. So that makes it challenging. Whereas actually, if we linked our data sets, we would be able to see anonymized, of course, exactly what is good and what is happening and what policies are working. So just looking in the chat, I think it's really interesting. Bart's point here on Labour's closeness to big tech. The government is too close and should have more focus on local tech initiatives. So the UK needs to be an AI maker, not taker. That's very fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And why are we letting US companies move into our AI growth? Juliet, one word like that. Okay, so we're not very confident now. Policymakers, slightly depressing, but good to know. So then what do we need to fix urgently? So the ODI has put here 4 areas that we think are the most important for tackling quickly. But if the ODI or other organizations were to push just for one, what would you be pushing for? Which is the theme that politicians find hardest to grasp, but is most urgent to fix? Is it data standards and interoperability? Is it responsible AI and assurance? Is it data access and sharing for innovation? Is it skills and digital literacy? What do we think here? So I'll just give everyone 30 seconds to review that. All right, so I'll give everyone 10 more seconds to answer this. Oh, not on there, Chris, you're right, sorry. But better underlying data infrastructure, yes, that's naughty of us to not include that as a choice. But if I'm honest, we thought you'd all pick it, so we wanted to push for something slightly different than data infrastructure. But yes, that is definitely a big one for us. So thank you very much. And yes, you're right, James. Responsible AI and assurance means very different things to different people. Ryan, yes, it is very hard to choose, but help us out here. So I'm going to end the poll now, and you can all see what everybody thinks. So you can see the majority of people think responsible AI and assurance, and then kind of almost equally split between the other elements, which is quite fascinating as an idea. And I guess maybe we've been a bit made things a bit tough here, because I don't know whether people assumed that as what's hard to grasp but urgent as 2 different things, because I assume most politicians understand skills and digital literacy as a concept, whereas lots probably wouldn't understand some of the other elements in the same way. So thank you very much for answering that. And thank you for sharing your thoughts. Long idea for Tom. Data standards and interoperability has been forgotten about. Interoperability between big social media problems would fix a lot of problems through decreasing market entry. Right, so you're kind of thinking open social media rather than open, the next step to open banking, smart data for social media. Is that what you're pushing for, Tom? Very interesting concept. I do sit on the Government Smart Data Council, so any thoughts on smart data I'm always here for. Thank you very much for sharing that. So just a few more questions for us to discuss. We've obviously talked at length about some of the areas and the topics when it comes to data and AI that are challenging for us. Sorry, excuse me. But I would love us to discuss now, which sector should the government prioritize for AI and data investment? What should the government be prioritizing? Healthcare, education, business and industry, climate and energy, or public administration? And of course, there are many other sectors we could have included. And these are very significant and broad areas, but it's just useful for us to have an understanding. We'll just give everyone a little bit of time to think about this one. Got answers flooding in. Starmer has apparently had close advisors such as Mandelson, who has promoted Trump-aligned US tech AI company Palantir and Tony Bett. Oh, interesting. What are the conflicts of interest? Well, that's a great question. Significant conflicts of interest, always a risk, aren't they? And I guess the question that I find most fascinating is what's happening in those conversations between closed doors, what's being promised. And one, I guess, if I'm devil's advocating, challenge for me is the UK is going to struggle, for example, when it comes to health data, to utilize that. We don't have the current capacity capabilities nationally to really utilize that. So how should those contracts be managed, if at all, or what investment should the UK be making? So I'm intrigued by these results. I'm going to share them with you now. 88% of people have participated. And I am really interested that climate and energy has come out on top, only shortly ahead of healthcare. But surprising to me that education is last with only 5%. So it would be great to know for people that picked either didn't pick education, or for people who just picked different areas, climate and energy and healthcare being the two big picks. Why is it people have picked those? I'm not disagreeing. I just think it's fascinating to see the outcomes there. Hello, Kane. Thanks for joining. Interesting set of questions and referencing the AI opportunities plan, which is, of course, important and relevant. Specifying business areas. I don't know. Feel free to share the link if you can. But that's great. And thank you, everyone else. Climate emergency, Tom. Yes, very important. To tackle that, and ironic in a way that AI could help us find a solution given how water intensive it is. So yes, we actually at the ODI do have some education tools that utilize AI, which have been very interesting. They're reasonably kind of small scale right now, but that's very fascinating. So thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts on that. Oh, Sarah, you don't trust the government with our health data. So very interestingly, several years ago now, kind of maybe like 7 years ago now, I went to Estonia to learn about how they were utilizing and sharing data. And one of the really interesting things about what they said was that in Estonia, the public are happy to trust the government with their data because they know there are really strong protections in place. So if you breach data protection, if you access someone's data that you know don't need to as a healthcare professional, there are proper penalties for doing so. You might lose a medical license, you might get fined, etc., etc. And oh, Madeline, great, you're referencing Estonia too. And they said there was a former, I think they said a prime minister or president who was in hospital, and 3 medical staff checked their records. They didn't need to do so, and they were having a bit of a nosy. They didn't do anything with that information, didn't sell it, didn't leak it. They just were intrigued, and one lost their license and one was fined. And they said, could you imagine in the UK what would happen if there was a data breach for medical data? Nothing would happen. That's why your people won't trust the government with the health data. And I thought that was really fascinating. So yes, Tom, that's a really interesting point on education. Thanks for sharing your experience. Gen AI is always a shortcut for a task students have been set and undermines learning. So what do you think, Tom, and anyone else in the chat? It's very difficult to stop students, I imagine, as someone who's not a teacher, from using AI for their homework. How do you manage that? How are you setting homework, or how are you adapting the way you teach and children learn to be able to manage that? That would be really interesting. So yes, and thank you, Alex, for sharing that. Really fascinating, the risk about hacking and data sharing, and that is a real challenge we've got to face and address. So now that we are talking about hacking and not trusting governments with data, what do you think would be the most likely to build public trust in AI and data? Is it independent assurance and transparency? Is it stronger regulation and enforcement? Is it industry-led ethics codes, or is it public engagement and citizen participation? What do people think? And yes, Madeline, thank you so much for referencing the ODI's webinar last Thursday. We do have plenty of webinars. I will be sharing at the end of this our next policy-related webinar, although I guess technically everything relates to policy. But if you would like to join, make sure you are signed up to our newsletter and you'll get all the information about our events. They're all free, or almost all of them are free. So yes, Mark, that's fascinating. In education, you believe it's teaching the young to use AI as a tool to enhance education, absolutely. And Juliet, yes, critical thinking skills. I think that's really important. How do people discern what the truth is anymore if they're believing what AI is telling them? Okay, so we've had most people participating in the poll now. So it seems there is a clear winner: public engagement and citizen participation. So anyone who's chosen that, what do you mean by that? Are you talking about opening up data sets for public engagement? Are you talking about citizen participation in deciding the sharing of data? How have you interpreted that? I know we've chosen that wording, but I'm always intrigued to know what people are thinking when they view something like that. And is anyone who picked C, industry-led ethics codes, surprised that 96% of people don't think that that is going to be the best way to do it? All right. Any thoughts? Okay, so less centralization in a few companies, self-ownership of data. Okay, how would you enforce that, Tom? That's really fascinating. James, you would be more confident if ministers made very bold claims that they will resign in disgrace. Well, I think we have seen ministers claiming they would resign, but then not doing so. So interesting to know, because you can't actually force people to resign. So what would actually need to happen? Inherent mistrust is endemic. Sad but true. Okay, thank you very much. You don't see how public engagement would provide ethical AI frameworks. Yes, I totally agree with that, but equally, I guess the question is more about, would it build public trust? So if we would have to do work on the ethical frameworks, but then how would you encourage public to trust in that afterwards? Is definitely an interesting challenge there. So that's good to know. Accountability. Accountability for whom, I suppose. My pushback would be to that, Janet. Really interesting pushback there, though, but I totally agree. The government has apparently been asking Trump-aligned US tech companies to write their tech policies. That does not make me trust their policies. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, very interesting. Thank you all. So just a few more questions, but I'm really enjoying the participation. As I said, if anyone wants to actually talk verbally, you're very welcome to, but it seems like we're having a great conversation in the chat. So thank you very much, everyone, for participating so wholeheartedly there. So last few. The question here that I'd like us to discuss now is, if you had to pick one quick win for improving the UK's data ecosystem, it would be common data standards across sectors, easier access to government data for innovators, stronger protection for personal data, and D, investment in local data infrastructure. And as ever, if you have thoughts here on options that we've missed, please feel free to pop them in. Okay, so answers are coming in. 2/3 of you, oh, 3/4 have given an answer so far. So I'll just give a little longer for people to think if they're still deciding. But this is interesting. We're always looking for examples of other governments that are kind of leading by example or doing interesting things when it comes to data or AI policies. So the Danish government is currently working to amend its copyright law to give citizens legal rights to their likeness. That's really fascinating. Someone told me a case at conference where, of course, we all know about revenge porn, and someone's ex-partner used AI to create kind of a fake pornographic video of them. And when that woman took it to the police and reported it, the police said, well, actually, this isn't you. She said, it's not me. They've used AI. And the police said, well, if this isn't you, then it's not revenge porn. But of course, to anyone who had seen the video in her friendship group or in her wider circle, did not know it was AI. And so here that comes a challenge of like, actually, when it comes to identity, how are we combating the use of AI for nefarious reasons? And is our criminal justice system able to keep up with that? So I'm going to end the poll and share. And I very much appreciate, Chris, your view on none of these are particularly quick and raise a lot of ethical concern. How can these effectively be policed? So yes, I mean, I guess within reason, actually, we could reasonably quickly offer access to government data for innovators. I guess we need to sandbox it and ensure the appropriate protections. But okay, my pushback to you and others in the chat then is, what do you think the quick wins are that are available? What could we be doing that would feel different or would be different? Let me know. Let's have a think about that. So what else have we got here? Enforcement and disallow offloading responsibility to sloppy third parties, mirror EU policy. That's very interesting. Forcing open source training data sets or models to change the structure of the market. Hard to balance with IP rights of companies to motivate R&D investment, I suppose. And of course, we do have the US president to contend with if we are doing anything that challenges US big tech. Not that we shouldn't do it for that reason, but of course, just the challenge we've seen. So, framing and engagement. When politicians talk about AI, what do you think they most often get wrong? Is it overhyping the risks, overhyping the benefits, ignoring practical implementation, or treating it as purely a tech issue rather than a societal one? What do we think here? And of course, as ever, please do feel free to share if you think there's an option E or F that you feel is even more important when it comes to what politicians are talking about. What do they get wrong more often than not? Thank you all so much for participating. As someone who loves data, it's really fascinating to see all of your responses and thoughts here. I hope you're finding that interesting too. Oh, James, struggling to choose, hung between B and D, but D is really closely related. So hung between overhyping benefits and treating it as really a tech issue. So that's really, yes, okay. Underhyping, oh gosh, sorry. Yes, underhyping risks, Tom, you are correct. I made that mistake on purpose to check you were all really reading the options. But yeah, sorry, A is underhyping risks. Thank you. Although actually, if people do think we're going overboard on the risks, that might be interesting too. But forgive me, I did mean to say underhyping there. Chris, yes, understating the work it really requires. When you say the work it really requires, what do you mean from that? The work it requires to make sure we build in the correct societal guardrails? Do you mean the data literacy? Do you mean the infrastructure on the data? What does that mean? Nick, yes. Censoring socialists. That is a challenge. Oh, Sarah, tell us a bit more. You've said some people have alleged that the Labour government is making tech feudalism arrangements with Trump-aligned US tech companies. This is the risk to our democracy. What do you mean? Can you outline that a little bit? But thank you. I'm going to share now. Most people have replied, so let's just share the results. for a bit of discussion on this. What do they often get wrong? So most people think it's treating it as purely a tech issue rather than a societal one, which I think is really interesting that people feel that strongly about that. And then secondly, overhyping benefits. I mean, it is interesting because we have seen some very impressive results when it comes to things like cancer detection. But I guess, do you mean overhyping because it'll be a while away till we can use these things at wide scale, or why do people feel that those benefits are overhyped? I find that really interesting to hear. So thank you all for sharing. I've got only two more, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about our upcoming events and what we plan on doing. So the last two questions, the penultimate one, how should organizations like the ODI best engage politicians on data and AI? We are a membership organization. We do really care about engaging with other members of civil society. We do really want to make sure that we are kind of utilizing events like this to really make sure we're focusing on the things that are important. So should we be doing practical demonstrations and case studies like Open Active? Should we be doing closed door roundtables for trusted discussion? Should we be having public campaigns and media commentary? Or should we be having commissioned research and policy papers? I know the ideal is all four, but what would the priority be? What do you think we should be doing? Most people have replied, so I'll just give 30 more seconds on this one. Oh, Billy, I'm sorry, I cannot give you the figures from the last poll this second. But when we are done with the polls, I can tell you about poll number 8. I can't show you until we've ended the poll. But we've got, most of you have replied, so I'm going to share these results now. So sharing these results. James, I will be writing up this webinar and utilizing the data within that, and we'll be including the outcomes of the poll in that piece. So you absolutely can have all of the poll summaries. I'll ask your forgiveness now. You'll need to be a little patient. It'll be next week, but you will of course have them all. And thank you so much all for sharing your thoughts so openly. So look here, kind of pretty tied between public campaigns and media commentary and commissioned research and policy papers. So thank you for that. It's interesting actually, things like the practical demonstrations like Open Active, we've actually found very helpful for making AI as this kind of big monolithic thing that parliamentarians think about, something that's a bit more understandable and easy to engage with. And James, yes, totally agree. We actually do work in kind of coalitions with other civil society organizations. We partner with organizations. So we were founding partners of the AI Fringe that was organized by Milltown Partners along with a bunch of others. So we work kind of cross-party, cross-sector, you know, private, public, charity like that. But you're right. It's just interesting for us to know what you think we would be best focusing on. So very quickly then on to our final poll here. If we're thinking about evidence for decision makers, what kind of evidence most persuades decision makers to act on data policy? Do you think it's economic impact, so growth and productivity? Is it public service improvement, NHS, local government, etc.? Is it voter trust and accountability, or is it international competitiveness? And yes, Kate, you're absolutely right. Connected by Data does fantastic convening. There is a Signal group. I wish it was WhatsApp personally, but there is a Signal group with lots of very clever, brilliant people from great organizations doing lots of work across that. Decision makers in what context, Chris? Sorry, we're talking very much about kind of parliamentarians here. I'm talking about as a policy, global head of policy for the ODI, I'm talking about if we were to try and get parliamentarians or maybe departments like DFIT, DBT to think about it, that's what we'd be looking for. Should be, okay, so James, you think it should be about public service improvement and voter trust, but you think it will be a, well, interestingly, I mean, I guess a lot of them will be connected. So if we are thinking about, you know, if we could make significant savings in the NHS, that will come back down to the economic impact, of course, of lots of connections there. So that's really helpful. And yes, you're right. We're in a very tight financial spot, aren't we? So James, everything's going to need the economic argument. I don't want Rachel Reeves' job right now. Okay, I'm going to stop the poll in 10 seconds. So either select an option now or forever hold your peace. Oh, got in the last few answers there. Thank you very much. There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. This is it's actually just really interesting to hear what people think. So here are your final poll results. Question for Resham: have any of the poll results particularly surprised you? I did think there would be more people that thought education as a sector would be important. And actually, I was surprised by how highly the Greens came out with the polling, not because I don't value their membership numbers or the kind of the work they've done for many, many years successfully on climate change areas, but more you just don't see much in the headlines, and they don't tend to engage much kind of in some of the parliamentary discussions on data and AI. I guess there's numbers element too. So that did surprise me, but pleasantly so. And I guess same question to all of our brilliant attendees. Thank you all so much for sharing so openly, by the way, your thoughts and your votes. And as I said, we'll write this up and we'll share all the outcomes. But have any of the results surprised you particularly? Is there anything where you thought, oh, I fundamentally disagree with the outcome of that? It would just be really interesting to hear. I'm going to stop sharing now on the polls, but thank you very much. And like I said, we will be sharing them. Ken, reflecting on the conversation as a whole, you want to come back to the big question about the way AI and data is treated as a policy area. There will be important choices made each year that will impact people's lives. Yes, totally agree with that. Really important. What a great comment to add at the end of the polls there. Jo, can we have the next slide, please? I'd just like to share a little bit briefly with you all about what we intend to do, although we'll be taking some time to percolate and absorb and write this up, and then think potentially about how we could redirect some of our work, but also what we might be able to do with other organizations. And if any of you in this chat want to partner on some work or kind of coordinate actions, then we'd be very happy to do so. So just to talk about what we'll be doing from a policy point of view, and I think the slides are being a bit sticky, so forgive me, I'll start talking, and I know Jo is going to move us to the next slide very shortly. But the policy team is going to be carrying, oh, can I turn the poll off? I thought I had turned the poll off. Let me just end this now, because I think that's giving us issues for sharing. Jo, are you able to share the screen? Is that clicking through now? That should be able to, because I've ended the polls. But if not, I can just talk. Okay, great. Since you're working now, you'll be able to see the slides in a second. But we are leveraging upcoming research. We have a fantastic research team led by Professor Elena Simple. So we'll be focusing on things like the value of data, data standards, AI readiness, AI and data institutions, and the National Data Library. That's coming out from our research team. And what we'll be doing as a policy team is making it matter politically. So what we want to do is translate the technical into the tangible. We intend to frame each area around public outcomes. So thinking about things like safer AI, faster NHS diagnoses, better targeted public spending, and stronger digital markets. We also want to meet politicians where they are, so linking our work to their priorities, productivity, growth, trust, cost savings, regional prosperity. I think all of those are areas that we think are really important. We want to use evidence and storytelling, so using real world case studies, so things like social prescribing for Open Active. As I said, that's a really great case study of how we can use data to improve health outcomes and save the NHS money. And then we want to think about strategic empathy. So we recognize that interesting isn't enough. We need to make it relevant, urgent, and politically useful. And then I can only see a black screen. So sorry if that's all you can see. That might just be my laptop, or it might be the screen sharing letting us down. But that's okay. I will just let you know about our next event. So I'm sharing an Eventbrite page in the chat. Please do feel free to book. It's a private page right now. It will be shared publicly next week. Joe's sharing some lovely trees with us. I think we are having issues sharing the Google Doc, but that's okay. You can see the Eventbrite page. Joe, don't worry about it. So just to share, we are having a webinar. It's focusing on diversity in tech. It will take place on Tuesday, the 18th of November. As I said, the Eventbrite page is in the chat, and we are fortunate to be joined by a fantastic lineup of people. It's going to focus on diversity in tech, who builds, who benefits, and who's left behind. The 1 hour webinar that I'll be chairing, and we've got confirmed speakers, the Right Honourable Harriet Harman, Baroness Harman. She was the former Minister for Women and Equalities. She was the author of the Equalities Act, longtime champion for fairness and inclusion, and she's the chair of the Fawcett Society. Claire Thorne is the CEO of Tech She Can, driving gender equality in technology and innovation. And we do have a third speaker we're just confirming, who will be speaking more to the race, ethnicity, and disability elements of technology and AI. So the kind of focus there is on how AI is influencing every part of our society, and how diversity in tech is important, not just in terms of the workforce, but the data design and decision making that sit at the heart of that. So when data isn't representative, when algorithms mirror our inequalities, or when accountability is missing, how do we challenge the biases that will be entrenched from that? So please do book to come along. Please do share that with colleagues that you think will be interested. And otherwise, it is, for me, so we've got 1.5 minutes left. If anyone has any final comments they'd like to share, any thoughts, any questions, please feel free to pop them into the chat. But otherwise, I think it's just up to me to say thank you so much for giving us your time, your thoughts, your insights, your opinions. We will be writing this up in the next week and sharing it, kind of the write-up with all of you, and there will be a recording that will be placed online as well. Please do feel free to share with anyone that you think would be interested. Thank you all so much otherwise. And I will just very quickly share, I know I was asked for the results for poll number 8, I think it was. So I'm just sharing that just for 30 seconds. But otherwise, thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your days. Glad you found this interesting. We'll do more of these. Thank you very much, everybody.